Hello everybody. It is July 23rd, 2025 here in the United States of America. And in today's video I want to talk about the current Syrian president Ahmed al-Sharaa, formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, and the decisions that he must make now as the current president of what's left of Syria. And I say what's left of Syria for good reason. The country is essentially in ruins. I'm not saying that it's some kind of apocalyptic wasteland, but it has really no military to speak of, no real power left. It's bankrupt. Its economy is essentially gone. The country is fragmenting once more into warring factions, although the de facto power rests with the new Syrian government under Al-Julani. They do not wield complete control over the country, and they actually don't wield complete control over their own militia forces either, much to Al-Julani's detriment. So, currently Al-Julani finds himself in a very difficult situation. Israel, under no set of circumstances, will allow a sovereign and strong Syria to rise from the ashes, especially a Syrian nation that is allied with Turkey, because it would give Turkey a direct corridor if any conflict were to happen right to Israel's border. Israel does not want that under any set of circumstances, and Syria can't afford to stand on its own. It needs allies in the region, and it needs assistance. Now, Turkey has been one of the main funders of Al-Julani's former group, HTS I believe they were called, and they were meant to serve as a thorn in the side, a perpetual thorn in the side to Bashir al-Assad, because of the differences that al-Assad had at the time with Turkey's President Erdogan over issues in the north involving the border and the Kurds. Now, there seemed to have been some progress made toward some kind of reconciliation between Syria and its neighbors a few years back, but those talks stalled. Relations turned sour once again with Turkey, and I think that Erdogan decided to finally pull the trigger and put this dying dog down. And I don't mean that in a detrimental way. I had nothing against the Syrian nation or the Syrian people, but while Assad was able to hold on to power for quite some time, much longer than anyone had assumed that he would, and while he had, at least up until I'd say 2 years ago, it was pretty clear that he had won the Syrian civil war and everything was all but over, the sanctions were finally taking their toll on Syria to the point where it was a complete house of cards. No one was getting paid. The economy was in tatters. The members of the military weren't getting paid. Morale was tanking through the floor. There was just general incompetence in the military. They were no longer doing their jobs. There was no discipline to speak of. Many of members of the Syrian military had resorted to banditry and extortion at checkpoints. This was something that was fairly well known, and all it took really was one final push to topple the government. Now, I don't think anyone at the time really realized how dire things had gotten in Iran, in Syria. And one of the reasons why Syria was able to hold on so long is they did receive direct military aid from Russia and Iran. But I think what really happened, though, and why those two countries, just to cover this real quick, why Iran and Russia didn't help Syria was because they didn't feel like it was their job to perpetually prop up Assad's government, that too much of a toll had been taken on it, and it was not an undertaking that Russia and Iran were really willing to do. It wasn't something they were willing to spend the time and the money on, despite the strategic importance of Syria, especially to Iran. Now, Russia, it didn't really change the strategic situation too much for Russia. As far as I'm aware, they still have their bases. They've negotiated with the Syrian government about this. But Iran, this really hurt Iran's strategic goals in the region. It cut off its lifeline to Hezbollah, and I'd say basically cut the resistance against Israel's goals in the region, basically cut it in half. Hezbollah in Lebanon was completely severed from Iran, and Iran lost one of its key allies in the region. So that says a lot right there. If Iran was willing to lose this key piece that it needed strategically within the region, then things had to have been dire enough in Syria to where Iran just could not muster the resources to keep that government propped up and wasn't willing to send its military directly in. That being said, Al-Julani does now find himself in a very difficult situation. He is no ally of Iran. He wants nothing to do with Iran, mainly for sectarian reasons. He's attempting to bring Syria back into the fold of the international community, if you will. He is doing everything he can to ingratiate himself with the United States, with European powers, and with Israel. But again, as I've mentioned before, Israel will not let Syria stand on its own 2 feet. Once southern sections of Syria for its own, Israel does, if it wishes to survive as a nation, it does need to expand. It needs more land. I think it's kind of hard to deny it at this point. Israeli birth rates are fairly high, and they have very little land to speak of and no real strategic depth. Israel desperately needs to expand. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm not saying I agree with it. This is detrimental for people in the region, but Israel, for its own survival as it exists now, wants land. It does not want any more adversarial nations directly on its border. It does not want funding to reach Hezbollah. It does not want Turkey to have influence on its border, and it wants regions of Syria. And what better way to do that than to make sure that Syria never becomes a sovereign nation once again and falls apart into warring factions and does not become a nation that's whole once more. And Al-Julani can't do anything about that. Israel will never let Syria be a non-dysfunctional country. There's just no way around it. So what really can Al-Julani do at this point? I think his only real option, I think, is to go to the Turks for help. Israel has systematically destroyed what was left of the Syrian military, so in the future Al-Julani's forces couldn't use them, which is a smart move by Israel. Fairly brutal, but smart move nonetheless. Syria can't produce its own domestic tanks and aircraft at this point, so once those are destroyed, they have to buy more. Well, how are they supposed to buy more if they don't really have any money to speak of? Take out loans? It would put too much of a strain on their economy. And if Syria were ever to start importing weapons, attempting to build up its military, Israel would just strike those units wherever it pleased, because there's no air defense left to speak of. Al-Julani, if he wishes to see his new revived version of Syria survive, then I think he needs to resolve himself to being adversarial with Israel. There's just no way around it. He's going to have to ingratiate himself with the Turks, with the Russians, with the Chinese, try to import weapons as best he can, do his best not to anger or bring the ire of the United States down upon him, and present what he's doing as a purely defensive measure against Israel and possible Israeli aggression. It's his only real option at this point, and if he can't show strength to his people, if he can't show that he can bring his country back to its own 2 feet, if he can't successfully stand up to Israel, then he loses all face within the Arab world. If he's seen as a lapdog of Israel, so to speak, if he's seen as weak and cowering in front of them, especially considering all that's happening in Gaza and all the support that Arab nations voice for Gaza, if he can't, if he's constantly at the mercy of Israel, no matter what he says and does, and if he appears to be groveling, well, that hurts his credibility tremendously with his own people. And if a leader can't provide safety and security and reassurance for some kind of future, well, then he won't last very long in office. He'll go the way of Bashar al-Assad, except I think much faster. Also, too, one of his biggest issues is these militias that seem to be out of his control, that are currently persecuting and killing minorities in southern Syria, the Druze and Christians. What I think happened is I think HTS, while he was the head of it, so to speak, it's still made up a bunch of decentralized militias that he doesn't have a lot of control over, regardless of what he says. They're interested in their own sectarian issues, their own religious goals, so to speak, and no matter how much he tries to rein them in, they're probably still going to go around shooting people. And this is, again, something that's going to hurt him tremendously, which is why I don't think that he is purposefully allowing this to happen, because it's in his own interest to rein these militias in, to pacify the country as best he can, to stop the sectarian killings, because if he's able to do that, then he can receive foreign aid again, the sanctions will be lifted, and people would be willing to invest in a country that's stable and isn't being run by mobs that are slaughtering people in the streets. If he can't bring these militia groups to heel and stop violence, again, that discredits him as a leader and makes him look weak. So what Al-Julani needs to do to survive in his position in Syria is to, first of all, build up some kind of deterrence against Israel. Turn to the Russians, turn to the Chinese, turn to the Turks, do everything he can to at least try to build his air defenses back up, to at least try to exert some kind of sovereign power over Syria once more, and do so quickly before Israel seizes more land within southern Syria. Now, should he get himself into a direct confrontation militarily with Israel? No. But if he wants to deter any further Israeli aggression, then he needs to dig his heels in quickly, because groveling to the Israelis isn't going to do any good. Also, too, he needs to stop the sectarian killings immediately. Syria is a multi-religious country and has been for a long time. As an Orthodox Christian, I'm appalled by what he sees. And if he can't bring safety and security to his people in the region, his people include Christians and other minorities, and if he's going to allow his country to fall into sectarian and religious violence, then there is no future for Syria. So if this man is actually interested in the future of his country, then he needs to bring about law and order and do so quickly. He needs to find every way possible to have the sanctions lifted and allow money again to flow into Syria, so people start getting paid again, so he can pay members of his military. That is what he needs to do. Now, will he succeed in any of this? I don't know. I would like to see Syria again be a peaceful and stable nation. I'm not saying I support this man, but this is just my honest take on what he needs to do to succeed at becoming the legitimate ruler of a stable Syria. Now, will any of these things happen? I don't know. I personally am doubtful about his future. I don't see him lasting very long as the president of Syria, especially if he allows these problems to continue. If he's continually humiliated by Israel and can't rein in his militia groups, or if he's actually refusing to rein them in and letting them do these things, well, then he might as well just give up now, flee Damascus, and leave the country. Because the international community probably won't stand for too much longer, and he desperately needs the sanctions lifted. And the only way to do that is to stop the killings and stabilize the country. But anyways, that's all I really wanted to talk about tonight. I'll be back Saturday with another video around the same time. Not sure what topic I'm going to touch upon. Maybe the current issues facing President Zelensky of Ukraine, and what decisions I think he might need to make to ensure his country has a future. But we'll see. Anyways, I hope everyone out there has a good night, and until next time.